Welcome to the Studio 2023 and this discussion on driving business impact through data-empowered experience. Thank you for joining me today. What is the importance of data-empowered experience in today's business landscape?
I can grab that one. So we at Elsman believe that data is a key to unlock value for organizations. And there has been a lot of work done already. So I think most organizations are dealing with data in one sort or another. But a lot of times it's very siloed, and a lot of times it's disjointed from the front-facing element of the organization. So basically the experience, that can be the customer experience or the employee experience. So there's a huge opportunity to utilize that data from a customer-centric point of view and be able to deliver value to the organization. So basically either creating new products and services that are unique to the organization and leverage that data, or many times we see recently it's about changing the way that the operational model works. So how do the employees deliver that value? What are the operational processes and how are they changing with new interfaces, with new integration of data, with new way of empowering employees?
Maritza, what's your experience of the data-empowered experience in your organization?
Well, the thing is that we operate in the knowledge economy. In fact, I think there are very few companies that can say that they don't operate in the digital and knowledge economy. And the currency of the knowledge economy is data.
Is that a point that people would agree with?
Yeah, I think I would agree with it. I think the interesting challenge for organisations now is that the narrative around data has changed, and has changed probably quicker than organisations have been able to keep up. So a narrative has changed from a past tense, data told us stuff about things that had happened, to a present tense, data is telling us stuff about things that are happening, to a future tense, we need to use data to anticipate and plan and react. And I think the shift inside organisations is difficult, because an organisation that built its data science team around, the next iteration of reporting isn't well placed to have a future tense conversation. So I think there's a lot of change that's coming into the organisation that people have got to react to.
I'm certainly seeing that in finance departments, in organisations. Is that something you see?
I think for me is, there's lots of data, there's more data than we've probably ever had in our lives, and actually it's how you bring that into insights. And actually data doesn't provide you insights, it's actually what you do with that data and join it with your business model that actually drives the insight. And I think it's actually understanding how do you take the organisation on that cultural change is really key to making sure it succeeds.
I think you raised a very good point in terms of amount of data we need to process nowadays. And if we look at it from the consumer experience perspective and from the employee experience perspective, I think that people are really struggling nowadays to cope with the increasing amount of information and interactions which they need to make. And those organizations which can use the data and about the preferences of the consumers and the employees and use this data to increase the relevance of interaction with them, I think that this gives absolutely amazing competitive advantage nowadays.
And you've all touched on this, but we hear a great deal in the news, particularly in the UK, about productivity being a challenge. How can we use data and design then to change the employee experience, the employee proposition, and then how does that benefit the customer? Is anyone sort of tackling that big productivity challenge that even our world leaders are scratching their heads over?
Yeah, productivity, I think that to make sure it really comes from the right interactions of the employees and getting the access to the right information. In the sea of opportunities of people are having access to too much information at the moment, and they're struggling to generate valuable insights. So I think that it's the art how the companies can really aggregate the data and give their employees the access to the right information to make the right managerial decisions. and also how we can use digital technologies nowadays a bit wiser to make our collaboration more effective and not overwhelming for people. I think that this is where, for me, productivity is coming from, really.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I think the challenge you've got is historically we've always gone down verticals of data. So we talk about finance departments, supply chain departments, and commercial. The actual art of how we drive data and bringing it centrally is understanding how we can get vertical through our organisations. You know, everything from forecasting demand to making the right products. That's not a commercial unit or a finance unit or supply chain. It's the harmonisation of getting people to think in that way, and actually then being very insight-led, bringing the consumer insights in there. It's more holistic rather than actually trying to just find piecemeal ways of trying to apply data into knowledge. It's bringing all of those pieces into a sort of that synergy together.
Yeah, and I mean, it's super important. You've used the word culture and insight. A lot of organisations, as they go into a productivity period, they forget things very, very quickly, and they go back into traditional silos. I know my information, I'll work with my information, I'll make myself more productive because, and they seek out data that reinforces the activities that they already wanted to undertake anyway. Whereas if you have created a data culture or an insight culture inside your organization that spans those boundaries, then you will have different conversations about productivity. You'll look more horizontally around your organization and you'll make very different decisions. But ultimately, that's not a data challenge, that's a culture and an organizational challenge. And we need to sort of push that narrative.
There's so many interesting things here that I agree with, because I think the next challenge is not the data challenge. I think that's 100% right. It's a human challenge. It's an interaction challenge. It's an experience challenge. How do you move from providing lots of data to your organization and lots of dashboards, lots of insights tool? How do you make the data actionable? And I think 100% you have to intervene that within the experience, either for your customer or for your employees. It should be effortless. The data just should be there, and it should support and enhance your role. You don't need to go and look for it and ask for it, which a lot of times you have to when you work with insights and analytics. And also, traditionally, the function is very much coming from a silo. So even at the best kind of effort, it is siloed across departments. It is siloed across the organizational metrics. And the way to solve it, in our opinion, is about approaching it from the customer point of view. And again, that can be internal customers, so basically your employee. And that can be external customers, so your consumer. What helps them? How can you make their jobs, make their work, make their goals easier to achieve?
Yes, I would like to add something to that. So I also agree with all the points made. I absolutely agree that culture is incredibly important if we want to drive returns and help and enable through data. The other thing that I want to add is that we have to also focus on the basics, and we've got to get the basics right and the foundational things. So it's all good and well to design great data products and to have fantastic data literacy programs to help people actually use those products. But if we are not focusing on data management and data governance, which are the foundational things, then we are not providing data that's of a really good quality. We're not focusing on the performance of our data platforms, etc. And those are the things that actually become a hindrance in people really using data in an effective way. So yes, we've got to focus on the culture, we've got to focus on the information design, but also on the basics, the foundational things. It's not just a one-dimensional focus.
That's a great point. There's quite a few studies out there, isn't there, of staff distrust in their own organisational data and the issues that, as you say, that creates of not then taking that data and doing anything with it. Have any of you got examples where you've successfully leveraged data to revolutionise the client outcome that the client receives, or your operating models, or the overall business impact?
Let me probably kick off. For me, the great example is we launched a couple of years ago Nutrition Academy. So this is very personalized learning for dietitians, because one of our businesses is specialized nutrition in Danone. And we started to use the data which we are collecting about dietitians who are interacting with us to understand their preferences and tailor the content for them. So it has absolutely amazing response. And I believe, truly believe that it helps us to become and to remain the number one choice for dietitians as a partner working with them. So we also connected offline data with online data. So now dietitians can have the tailored content on our website depending on which conferences they are attending, and also the offer of the conferences depending on their interests. So great feedbacks from them, how it helped them really to improve their knowledge, how it helped them in their day-to-day work, and again improved significantly our partnership relationships with them.
Which presumably is giving you just a bit of competitive edge.
And it helps us to keep our competitive advantage, of course.
Yeah. Everybody else revolutionised?
Well, coming from a healthcare background and working in healthcare at the moment, you'd expect me to jump on this one. And it's interesting, the Danone experience. We've got a plethora of data stories I could tell you, but I'll link into one. We run the largest diabetes prevention program in the UK. And one of the things that is revolutionary about the data inside that program is not actually what the program does, but what the program enables. The program enables us, the data in the program enables us to predict when someone is going to fall out of the program, when someone is not progressing through the program. And it allows us to consider treatments and strategies that will bring that individual back into the program and get them to a successful outcome. Now, those elements would have been at best conversational a few years back, at worst probably on a 6-month occasional visit cycle. Now we can do it in real time. Now we can look at exactly what you were doing inside the program and help you complete the program. And that revolutionises remission, that revolutionises prevention. So there are great things, but like everything, with great power comes great responsibility, and we have to use the data very wisely as well.
And you mentioned the conversation piece there, but it's empowering that old-fashioned conversation piece, which enables it to
100%. We talk about digitally empowering people. Actually, it's data empowering people. When you give people insights that they can use and they can enact at the right place at the right time, and this is where context and situation comes into how you use data. When you do that, it is genuinely transformative.
Context and situation, I hear that a lot in the data world. Is that something that you're seeing really helps organizations to deliver those big changes, not just a data program, but a change in how the business operates?
I think all change program at that scale has to have very clear KPIs behind it and very clear reasons of why you setting out to do what you're doing. If we're talking about productivity, many cases, everything boils down to how you're going to be saving money for the organization, how they're going to be delivering value faster. We work cross-sector, so we've seen examples in FMCG, we've seen examples in health. I'll add another example for another sector that a lot of times is considered very traditional, construction sector. So we have a client, very large construction company called CBRE. It's a B unit within it, a very big organization again called Turner & Townsend. They work on very large infrastructure programs. So they work on the Shard, the Crossrail, really big stuff, and they run cost controls on that. Traditionally, it was a people's an Excel sheet and an email business. Today, it's a platform that is sold to the client, to these infrastructure projects, as part of a value that the organization brings. And everybody comes into that platform. All of the data comes into that platform. And it creates these conversations. It allows information to travel much better. It allows both the client side and the employee side interact with the core kind of use case of what this organization does at a much, much more effective level.
And it's extending relationships, isn't it? You know, you're not just the constructor now. You continue to work with the tenants or whoever of that building long into it, and which of course feeds more data and more opportunities, doesn't it? I guess there's some synergies there for your sector.
There absolutely are, and it's about bringing. I think there's two things I've heard. One is around that competitive advantage, and also around the bringing together. And actually, data is your competitive advantage in a very aggressive FMCG world. Getting to market with the right product and with the right proposition for our customers is absolutely key, and it's actually understanding data. So we've done things around revenue growth management. How can we understand, with some challenging headwinds that the industry's had with the cost of living and also supply chain challenges, is what's the right product mix? How do you actually take the data? What will the consumers enjoy? What will enhance their lives at the right price point and the right proposition? And it's only bringing together understanding sell-in data in terms of some of our big customers, and then they sell to the consumers, understanding what the sell-out from those are and who's buying what, where, how, when, and then bringing that together with social channels, listening in terms of those wider products. Every single thing that we're trying to do as a business generates data. And it's about making sure that you just take the insights and the moments from that data, because that's the piece that gives you that competitive advantage, because that makes you get to market quicker. That makes you get to the right. Make sure when somebody's walking down a shelf, whether that be physically or virtually, they pick your product because you've got the right proposition for them.
Yeah. How do you find out of all of that toxic noise the piece that is important for your customers?
It's there's no one size fits all. I think actually from a data perspective, there are different lenses, so understanding what do we do from product and making the right product through how is our marketing being received? How are people actually going when we send some marketing out? Are people actually translating that into conversion of picking the product and putting it in their basket? That's the absolutely critical piece. So there is no one size fits all, but I think what we're trying to do is bring together that data set that actually you can lens it from whichever angle you need to, but what you get is a consistency of base, because actually everybody's talking around the same unit, whether that's focused around consumer or products or or the geographies that we're in as a global organisation, and that is challenging from more modern developed markets in sort of the UK compared to some of the challenges in Indonesia and Nigeria, where we're in more traditional trade. So each market sends its own challenge. Each market brings its own data points, and it's how you bring that and actually factor that into the business thinking is absolutely critical.
I'd like to give an example from banking, and it's a great example because this is where we've managed to bring together commercial concerns as well as data for good, or using data for good, and that is financial inclusion and education. So traditionally, we use very traditional data sources to determine a potential customer's creditworthiness. We build very traditional risk models, also using traditional data sources, but that's really based on people who have credit histories. But it excludes a lot of people, especially in Africa, where people do not have credit histories. So it's far more difficult to determine creditworthiness. But financial inclusion and how we're using data in financial inclusion is to find alternative data sources to fill those gaps. So, for example, we can use data from a cell phone or mobile data. We can use data from retailers and even statements, bank statements. But looking at that data and those alternative data sources, we can determine whether someone is creditworthy in a non-traditional way. And in this way, we are actually managing to design banking products and financial products that's more customized to people who have traditionally been excluded from more traditional financial products.
Fantastic. We've talked about data and empowering the employees with that data. What about how they're accessing that data and using that in terms of the consumerisation of devices and what have you? How is that changing the workplace? You're not just putting data out there, but you're connecting it to the devices, and we've got manufacturing, we've got healthcare. Industries typically are not where you see a lot of mobile phones, tablets, etc. That I know, but tell us that landscape is changing, isn't it?
I would say on the opposite. So I think that actually COVID really helped digitalization. I think that now everybody see it. And employees got used to have access to the information on the go. So I think that one of the tasks in front of every organization is how to ensure that people have access to the data at the right point of time. Because if we're talking about the field employees, so how they can get access to the right data about the outlet when they are in the outlet. If it's office employees, and they are traveling in the business trip, how they can get the right access to the right information to make decision. If they are preparing presentation on the plane, if they are working from the hotel, if they're going to the meeting room. So this is where mobility of the data is really, really becoming important, and I think that it's not passing by any industry. I think that it's relevant really, really across all the industries nowadays.
I think the last 4 years with COVID and also the push towards collaboration it's brought a certain level of norm around that technology. So everybody expects to be able to collaborate, expects to be able to work on things together. I think the industry is going through the same cycle in terms of data, in terms of there'll be an expectation, especially where things like Microsoft launch Copilot in a few weeks' time and drive out some of that new tech, there'll be an expectation that when I turn up to those business moments of decision, that the technology will present me with the insights I need to help me execute my role. And actually, but the expectations when people come into the organisation now are no longer around, well, give me an Excel spreadsheet. It's actually, where can I get the data? Where can I get my insights? How can I drive that out? And as technology functions, we've got to understand, actually, yes, we've got technology, yes, we've got data, but actually the digital plays, the execution in those business moments is what we should be trying to focus on. And it does drive us more towards that sort of user experience, that user journey, to find out when those moments are going to be there, whether that's a salesperson going to one of the big supermarkets and being able to go and justify why we should be on that shelf, and actually extending that to and what the competitors are doing and why we can do a better job. And I think it's just taking those moments of taking data but translating it into a contextualization at the point of use. And I think as an industry, that's where the next generation is really going to come to, and it's around that user journey.
100%. I mean, it's why user-centric design and user experience is as important in the employee experience as it is in your customer experience. You're absolutely right. COVID changed the way people interact with devices, with technology, and also how companies interact with their IT teams. The bar suddenly got set real high, and post-COVID, everyone's got to, because no one lets the bar go down afterwards. So design thinking, experience-based thinking, because if you're an organization that wants to put the power of decisioning in their customers' hands around their brands and their products, it absolutely behooves you to put the power of decisioning in your employees' hands so that they can make those insight-led decisions, not, oh, well, I've got to speak to the data team, or I've got to go to that spreadsheet, or can someone slice and dice this for me? That's the wrong conversation. Those conversations don't happen now. Those conversations are history. It's now about, I need to make this decision.
Yeah, being able to be actionable, being able to, and I love the co-piloting experience. It's so strong. Seeing how you integrate the machine into a process. That's to us the future of experience on data. Being able to provide the right context, the right thing to do to support your role in a very intuitive way, and it's a design problem. It's a UX problem. If you look, for example, at ChatGPT, right? So LLMs, large language models, all that technology has been pushed forward in the last decade. What really unlocked it is the interface. So, and in organizations, we think that's a huge opportunity.
I'd like to say something on that. It's a slightly different view to what we've just discussed. And I agree with all the points. I mean, there's no doubt that technology is helping us do our jobs better, it's augmenting the way we do things, etc. But the one thing that we're not really focusing on is the real impact, and sometimes the unforeseen impact of technology on people. So we are the always on generation, the work from anywhere, anytime generation. And now we are adding generative AI as well as work automation into the mix. So absolutely, we have to move forward. We have to focus on our digital and data strategies. But I do think that organizations have to find a balance between those strategies and the impacts of those strategies, and also think about the ethics, the change management, as well as managing the transformation in their organizations and the real impacts on people.
What Maritz's point there, is that also about how UX and those sort of things need to be both external and internal, that we don't just focus on our P&Ls all the time, vital as that is, but we've also got to think about, our culture and what have you.
I think they have to be, because that's the nature of the way we work. But you use an interesting word that when I talk about data, it's the third word that I add in. I talk about context, I talk about situation, and I talk about ethics. So if situation is where you are and context is what someone's doing, the third element has to be the ethical question. Just because I can, should I? And very often we're great at the first two and we're not good at the third. And I think as this all becomes more and more pervasive, as the always on generation are always on, I'm a great believer, once a tap is open, it's incredibly hard to close it. So the only thing we can do is add some kind of ethical lens, some kind of social lens to the flood that's already out there. And if you do that, I think then we're starting to have a slightly better conversation.
And as interesting as a number of CIOs have spoken to me lately, and ethics is coming up. It feels to me that that's one of the emerging trends of technology leadership, is actually to be as much an ethical leader as a business leader and a technological leader. And guess what? As CIO or CTO or CTPO, you've got to be all of those. Am I right in that analysis? And are there other emerging trends that you're seeing happening that both technological and sort of business and cultural?
I think from my side of things, it's the ethics, but it's also around sustainability, and again, this is about part of one of our values is for good. Actually to make sure what we're doing it with the right technology, with the right products, getting out to the right markets and enabling the consumers is doing the right thing, and absolutely that has to be ingrained in your organisation, whether it be and then signalled, whether it's through something like B Corp or those wider aspects. But actually, that can't just be within an IT function. That has to be ingrained in the organisational culture, and that gets driven from the top. And actually, I'm so fortunate to work for an organisation who absolutely believes that doing good is absolutely in its original mindset and has been all the way through its life. We're a 130-year-old company. But again, there are going to be other companies out there that won't necessarily have those ethical pieces. And the interesting piece is when somebody comes, especially in the competitive worlds, and comes into effectively as to take your business, is making sure that you still hold your values. That's absolutely super critical from an organisation, and actually you will have to trade on decisions in those moments.
Maritz, is that something you'd agree with? And so any trends you're seeing?
I do, 100%. So the number one trend in the industry, data and analytics industry at the moment, is data privacy and data protection. And I'm not surprised by that at all. And it is relevant to the conversation we have now, because we can use data in so many ways to understand our customers better, to forecast what they're going to do, how they're going to, or predict how they're going to behave. But personally, I feel my future is as private as my present. So I want organizations to use data in a responsible way. So absolutely relevant to what we're talking about, customer experiences. And as a customer, an experience that I definitely want is to know that my data is safe. An experience I don't want is a data breach, and to know that my data is out there. So I think data privacy, data protection, definitely very important. But the other trends that we are seeing, and we've seen them sort of coming along and bubbling under for many years, but this year they're definitely under the top 10 DNA trends, and that is augmented analytics, generative AI, and how that augments human capability as well as work automation. So definitely trends that's impacting on how we work and how we do our jobs, but it really is about automation and augmentation.
I cannot agree more with the points which were already raised. I would only add from my side that I don't see that the trend of personalization is going to reduce. Because I don't think that companies really unlocked personalization of experience, and neither for employees nor for consumers. I think that we are probably at the beginning of the journey, but how we can really make the interaction and with our consumers and with our employees super relevant for them, and make it in a very consumer-centric and employee-centric way. I think that we are still far away from the excellence there, given that what we were just discussing at the very beginning, the data in organizations are still in silos by departments, so we still don't have this holistic view at the data. So I think that it's still way to go, and we shouldn't forget about this trend.
I absolutely agree. The actual trend is to drive, especially in the sort of that marketing funnel areas, is to drive as much personalization and get to know your consumer as much as possible. And that's directly opposed to actually what do we do with that data, and actually should we have that data? So again, there are some ethical battles for organizations to go and wrestle with over the coming years.
I mean, it's really difficult. If you ask an organization, do you want more data about your customers? They'll go, yes, of course, give me more data. If you ask them what they're going to do with that data, you often get very different answers. So there's a bit of a why question here. You know, we know the technology can get us pretty much everything we need, but why do we need it? If I look at my life and the people who know me, they know me by virtue of the things I choose to publicize, or I choose to talk about, or I choose to show. They don't know me by nature of a whole load of other things that I didn't choose to make public. I don't walk around with a t-shirt that's got my name, address, my phone number, and I don't share that with everybody. So there's a ton of data you could have about me, but sometimes just look at the human experience. How do you get a better relationship with a person? It's about using the information they give you in a trusted and an ethical and a properly cultural way, rather than just screaming about a ton of information that's irrelevant. So I think we've still got a long way to go with this.
I recently met an organisation that had invested in ethnography, and it had the data, and the data said a particular person is costing a huge amount of money to our organisation. And then the ethnography training, they went and had a conversation with them, and they found actually another conversation with someone else would resolve the problem, lower the cost, and improve the lifestyle of this person.
100%. And it comes back to this: just because you can, should you? I work in healthcare. In the UK, healthcare is a provider-led service. But there are other markets where healthcare is a payer-led service. Now, what are the ethics around denying somebody a service based on what you know in a payer environment because it is cheaper or more cost-effective? That's an incredibly difficult set of decisions to grapple with.
Leon, you must listen to these and what your organisation does and realise there's lots of scope.
I'm going to try and connect all the dots because I think they're really connected with the opportunity that comes from large language models, AI, this new technology that is emerging, and the role that the CIOs, CTOs, and CDOs are taking, which is more and more central in the organization. There is this opportunity to redesign the organization with a much more ethical and human point of view. So we can use these tools to actually make work better. And we are on that shift. So we're saying, COVID did a lot of these changes. We had to adapt to a much more human-centered way of looking at work. And I think this technology is another shift that leaders can use to be able to redesign their organizations to be much more ethical, to be much more human-centered, to be designed for the better, moving away from what enterprise is in a lot of times, which is kind of pretty horrible experience for everyone. I think because of this shift, there is a chance to really seriously look at things again from a personal point of view.
To wrap up, could I ask you all for sort of one area, one thing that an organisation or a person should go away and begin to explore to become more data empowered, either as a team or an organisation? Maritza, I'll start with you if I may.
Well, the first thing you need to be clear on is, someone said it earlier, is why are you doing it? So what is the actual problem you are solving, or what is the actual opportunity that you are unlocking? So be clear on the use case and the impact of what you are doing. And that really is the starting point, because throwing technology at a process or at people is not going to give you the return or the benefits that you want. You actually really have to solve people's problems, and you really have to help them to do their jobs through technology with data. Otherwise, you're just not going to see the returns.
Colin?
I think for me, I'd echo everything that you've said, but I think the other things I would also talk through is this is a cultural change journey. Actually, you've got organisations that may not be used to actually utilising information in this particular way. That has both successes and pitfalls that we've talked about. So I think it's just understanding you are taking the organisation on a journey and making sure that you embed that in the business change that you're trying to do. And North Star absolutely on business change and outcomes. It's not about output, it's outcome, and just driving those out.
Darren?
I would add have a clear data strategy and bold choices, because many organizations are struggling to move towards the data-driven decision-making by spreading the resources across too many use cases. And as we discussed earlier, so you really need to make the breakthrough, you really need to take the holistic view and look at the problem very holistically, starting from the basics, like data management, data governance, up to all the way up to culture. Do people really use the data to make the decisions, or they just have the data for the sake of having the data? And you cannot address this broad spectrum across everything. So unfortunately, organizations need, if they really want to break through, they really need to make the bold choices where is their biggest opportunity, and really take this holistic approach addressing this opportunity.
Leon, if I can come to you next.
I really bought into the whole people point of view. So I think you have to understand and use as a filter what your customers want. And I really like using customers in both sides. So your employees are customers, treat them in the same way. What do they want? And then make the right choices. So succinctly focus on the very top things that help them do their job. So, we use a lot of times the framework called jobs to be done, which is a way to synthesize things into very clear jobs as a description of needs. And I think that's the approach that needs to be taken with data, looking at it through the human and customer lens.
Last but not least.
So I'm going to echo Maritz's point, because it has to start with why. And not wanting to horribly paraphrase a Simon Sinek, there's so much data out there, everybody knows what they could do with the data. Some organizations know how to organize to use data effectively. Very few organizations are asking themselves why. Ask the why question. Why are you using the data? Why is it going to solve your problem? Start from there, and I think you're then onto something good.
Thank you all for a fascinating debate. It's been really interesting. And thank you for tuning in to this Hot Topics debate.